The GM EV1. Nobody who leased a GM EV1 was ever allowed to buy one. That was the condition from the first day of the program, and it remained the condition until the last car was taken back and compacted. General Motors launched the EV1 in 1996 as a lease-only vehicle distributed to customers in California, Arizona, and Georgia. The body returned a drag coefficient of 0.19. The first generation used lead-acid batteries. The second switched to nickel-metal hydride cells, extending range to 140 miles. Approximately 1,117 were built across both generations. When the California Air Resources Board weakened its zero-emission vehicle mandate in 2002, General Motors used the change as the basis for recalling every car in the fleet. Lessees who had been driving their EV1s for years and who wanted to purchase the vehicle they had been using were refused without exception. The cars were collected and sent to a facility in Arizona. Most were crushed. A small number were disabled, drivetrains removed, before being handed to institutions for display. None function. None are privately owned. The customers who had been told from the beginning they could never buy the car turned out to have been told the truth. The turbine car. A gas turbine engine will run on almost anything that burns. Chrysler demonstrated this between 1963 and 1966 by handing the keys of 50 turbine-powered coupes to ordinary American families and letting them fill the tank with whatever was available: diesel, kerosene, vegetable oil, and at least once tequila. The cars had been built in Turin by Ghia, finished in a color Chrysler called turbine bronze, and fitted with a fourth-generation turbine unit producing 130 horsepower. 50 of the 55 built went into the public trial program. Approximately 203 families participated over 3 years. When Chrysler wound the program down in 1966, it asked for the cars back. Then it crushed 41 of them. The official justification involved customs duties. Because the bodies had been manufactured in Italy, classifying the cars as production vehicles would have triggered an import duty obligation Chrysler preferred to avoid. 9 were spared and went to museums and collections. None are privately held. Of the 41 that were destroyed, several had been the subject of purchase requests from the families who had been driving them. Those requests were declined before the compactor did its work.
The Mercedes-Benz C112. More than 700 people submitted deposits against a car that Mercedes-Benz had already decided not to build. The C112 appeared at Frankfurt in September 1991 and caused the kind of response that manufacturers usually spend years trying to engineer. A 6.0-liter V12 producing 600 horsepower. Active aerodynamics that adjusted downforce by speed, active suspension, a claimed 0 to 60 time of 3.2 seconds. Mercedes-Benz collected the expressions of interest, counted the deposits, and then reviewed whether the C112 could meet the reliability and safety standards the company applied to road cars. It could not, in the company's assessment. The 10 prototypes were recalled. Mercedes confirmed they were destroyed. The letters that went to the 700 depositors contained refunds and explanations. Not one person who had committed money to the C112 received a car. The prototype that had generated more genuine customer interest at a single motor show than most cars generate in their entire production lives was gone before it ever had one. The Porsche 989. The 989 would have been the first Porsche that could carry 4 adults in a rear-engined, rear-wheel drive saloon aimed directly at the BMW 7 Series and the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Engineering development had been running since the late 1980s and was substantially complete when Wendelin Wiesking arrived as chief executive in 1992 and looked at what the project required to reach production. Porsche, at that point, was in serious financial trouble. The 989 needed capital the company did not have and could not responsibly commit to a single new model in that climate. Wiedeking terminated it. The physical prototypes, the development work, and the tooling investment were all disposed of. No preserved example exists. Porsche built no four-door car for the following 17 years. The Panamera, launched in 2009 for the same market the 989 had been targeting, and engineers who had survived long enough to work on both cars acknowledged that some of what had been learned on the cancelled project carried through. The car itself was entirely gone. What it had taught was the only thing that remained. The Pontiac Banshee. The problem with the Banshee was that it was too good. John DeLorean's team at Pontiac completed two prototypes in 1964, a coupe and a convertible, of a two-seat sports car with a straight six in the base version and a V8 option. When General Motors corporate management evaluated the car, they reached a straightforward conclusion. A Pontiac sports car at the Banshee's price and performance level would take buyers away from the Chevrolet Corvette, and the corporation was not going to allow one division to damage another's most important product. The order to destroy both cars came from above DeLorean's authority. The convertible was crushed without dispute. The coupe is less certain. Some accounts hold that an engineer removed it from the destruction order and it survived. Others say both cars went the same way. General Motors has never confirmed a surviving example. DeLorean moved to Chevrolet in 1969 and left the corporation entirely not long after. He later built his own car. That one had its own problems.
The Jaguar XJ41. E-Type production ended in 1975. Jaguar spent the next decade trying to build a car that could fill the space the E-Type had left. The XJ41 was the sports coupe answer, and the XJ42 the four-seat variant, both developed through design, engineering, and multiple running prototypes across the 1980s, while Jaguar went through privatization and eventually into Ford's hands in 1989 for £1.6 billion. Ford's review of what it had bought concluded that the XJ41 and XJ42 required more capital to reach production than the return justified. Both programs were canceled. Ford's instruction was explicit. The prototypes were to be destroyed. Engineers who had spent the better part of a decade on the cars watched them go. The F-Type that eventually addressed the same intention launched in 2013, 38 years after the E-Type ended and decades after the XJ41 work had been scrapped. Most of the people who built the XJ41 were no longer at Jaguar to see what finally replaced it. The Bugatti EB112. Romano Artioli had rebuilt Bugatti from nothing, constructed a new factory in Campogalliano, and put the EB110 supercar into production at approximately $1.5 million per car by 1991. The EB112 was his next ambition, a four-door luxury saloon designed by Italdesign, presented at Geneva in 1993, its proportions referencing the great Bugatti coachwork of the 1930s. The engine drew on the EB110's quad-turbocharged V12. The target buyer sat between the Bentley Mulsanne and the Rolls-Royce Silver Spur. Artioli wanted to show that Bugatti could occupy more than one position in the market simultaneously. He ran out of time before he could show anything else. Bugatti filed for bankruptcy in 1995. The EB110 line stopped with it. The EB112 had not reached the stage of production investment when the collapse came and was swallowed by the bankruptcy proceedings. Volkswagen Group acquired the name and intellectual property in 1998 and built a different Bugatti entirely. The four-door saloon Romano Artioli had designed was one of the things the Volkswagen era left permanently behind.
The Lamborghini Cheetah. Lamborghini had built supercars and tractors. What it had not built was a military vehicle, which made the commission from American defense contractor Mobility Technology International in 1977 an unusual one. MTI wanted a four-wheel drive prototype evaluated by the United States Army. Lamborghini built one. The Cheetah used a large displacement V8 mounted at the rear of the chassis. It was sent to the United States for evaluation testing. During testing, it was involved in a serious accident and the prototype was destroyed. MTI sued Lamborghini over the design. The legal action severed whatever commercial relationship had existed between them and closed the project permanently. Lamborghini took the engineering experience from the Cheetah and applied it independently, producing first the LM001 and then the LM002. The latter powered by a Lamborghini V12 and built in approximately 300 examples between 1986 and 1993. The Cheetah left behind a lawsuit, a canceled contract, and enough institutional knowledge to make the LM002 viable. It left behind nothing else. The DeLorean DMC-12. The Belfast factory was still producing cars when John DeLorean was arrested on drug trafficking charges in October 1982. The charges were later dropped. The company did not recover. Around 9,000 DMC-12s had been built by the time the receivers arrived. Stainless steel body, gull-wing doors, 2.85-liter PRV V6 producing 130 horsepower. What the receivers found at the factory was a substantial inventory of completed and partially completed vehicles that had never been dispatched. The distribution network had ceased to function with the company. Some of the backlog was cleared through remaining dealer relationships and reached buyers eventually. A significant portion was not. Completed cars that had been driven off the production line, parked, and left waiting for a distribution system that no longer existed were compacted. The precise number destroyed in the receivership has never been agreed across the various accounts. The stainless steel that John DeLorean had chosen, partly because it would not rust and partly because it made the car look like nothing else on the road, went through the same process as any other scrap.
The Pontiac Solstice Coupe. The Roadster had worked. Pontiac launched the Solstice in 2006 against the Mazda MX-5, and the market responded. A coupe variant followed through the development process. Fastback roofline, sharper character, design approved, prototypes built, tooling investment authorized. At the Detroit Motor Show in January 2009, General Motors presented the Solstice GXP Coupe as a confirmed production car. 3 months later, in April 2009, General Motors filed for bankruptcy protection and announced it was eliminating the Pontiac brand. The Solstice Coupe went with Pontiac. The tooling spend was written off. The prototypes were not kept. People who had attended Detroit and come away planning to buy the coupe when it arrived received no further communication that amounted to a car. Pontiac as a brand ended in October 2010 after 84 years. The Solstice Coupe had been close enough to production that its cancellation was announced separately from Pontiac's closure, as though the car had its own obituary coming to it. The Saab 9-3 Final Generation. Saab had been sold by General Motors to the Dutch sports car company Spyker Cars in January 2010, and the next generation 9-3 had been in active development long enough that working prototypes existed and were running test programs at the point of handover. The engineering represented a genuine departure from the outgoing car rather than a revision of it. Spyker could not sustain the financial requirements of operating a car manufacturer at Saab's scale. The money ran out in stages through 2011. Saab filed for bankruptcy in December of that year. The prototype 9-3s became assets of the bankrupt estate, along with everything else. When the National Electric Vehicle Sweden Company purchased a portion of the remaining assets in 2012, the combustion-engined 9-3 program was not part of what they took on. The engineers who had built the prototypes found other employers. The cars they had developed were gone. In the years that followed, the buyers who would have bought the next Saab bought Volvos, or BMWs, or Volkswagens, and probably stopped thinking about it.
The Yamaha OX99-11. Yamaha's route into the road car business ran directly through Formula One. The OX99 was a 3.5-liter naturally aspirated V12 that had powered cars in Grand Prix racing through Yamaha's engine supply relationships. In 1992, a road car project was announced around a development of that engine. 400 horsepower, 10,000 RPM, carbon fiber chassis, tandem seating with the passenger behind the driver, the whole arrangement referencing a single-seater. 3 prototypes were built. The production plan was 300 cars at approximately $800,000 each. Japan's economic position had already deteriorated significantly from the peak of the late 1980s bubble, and the market that would have absorbed 300 cars at that price had contracted to the point where Yamaha's board declined to commit the capital that production required. The project ended in 1994. The 3 prototypes were scrapped. Yamaha built no road cars. The OX99 engine that had competed in Formula One and had then been developed for a road car that was never made went back into storage and then into history.